400 times more melatonin in the gut than in the pineal. So only drugs
Right.
cure. And that's the biggest joke ever. Melatonin has been shown to prevent the spread of COVID by 54%. It was a study in Canada. I mean, even just inflammation triggers the sympathetic nervous system. But if you have a heart attack or a stroke or anything like that, and you have methylene blue on board, you're not likely to have a lot of damage to your nervous system.
Best-selling author, regenerative and functional medicine doctor. Our guest today on the Settle or Be Better podcast is Dr. John, who's going to be talking to us about cellular energy, healing, and longevity. So, welcome, Dr. John, and over to you. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your personal health and well-being story and your current work?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been pretty open about some of my challenges with Lyme disease and mold and Epstein-Barr. Yeah, it was pretty rough, because when you're sick and you don't know what's wrong with you and you're searching and searching, you start to lose hope. And so some of the challenges psychologically can be as bad or even worse than the actual disease process. And that's what I found myself in many times, is just losing hope and just wishing that I was back to a normal, healthy status. It got so bad that it was hard to even walk at one point. And but it's like everything happens for a reason, I believe. And so it was my pain to purpose. So my purpose, in my opinion, is to help other people navigate health challenges. And I've been doing that for almost 30 years. I've been a chiropractor first and then a naturopath, and got my neurological certificate through the Carrick Institute of Neurology, which is really very difficult and was a lot of training, but it's allowed me to be able to have a unique perspective that's a little bit different than I think most people have. And the way that I operate in the clinic is really, I think, unlike anybody else, because I'm using so many different tools in unique fashions and kind of blending them together. So I started to produce some technology. I instead of calling it a supplement, I would say it's more like technology for health and wellness. Initially, it was different suppositories with rectal delivery, because that's what initially helped me more than anything else, was actually glutathione suppositories, because they don't absorb very well orally. Yeah, and so I found that I was resistant to doing something, in my butt. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. Exit only. But um, I was desperate, right? And so then I tried it, and it was just like no big deal. And then I felt so much better the next morning. And now, we produce through Mitozen, we produce, a lot of suppositories that we send all over the world. And I know we do ship to India, but we have some high dose melatonin, NAD, methylation, Methylmax. Uh, we work with some different cannabis, CBG, CBD, and some detox types of, and like I had mentioned with the glutathione. And so using those, a lot of practitioners who I train or who follow me find that using these different delivery methods can be much more effective. And so, like, after COVID, everybody had to like do stuff distance, right? So doctors that were used to doing a lot of IVs, they're finding
Right.
themselves having these distance programs where they're working with people from home. And so using these types of delivery methods, liposomals can be beneficial too. And nasal sprays, and I don't know. Are you very familiar with the Mitozen products,
Not
Shakshi?
really.
No. Okay. Um, Yeah, so we just I methylene blue is something I'm like fascinated with, and I know you wanted to talk about that, and we
Right.
should for sure talk about melatonin as well. I wrote a book on melatonin that's on Amazon, and there should be my second edition to Magic Bullet, which is about methylene blue. And it's called Magic Bullet. The book is called Magic Bullet because that's what the substance was called the magic bullet, and the phrase magic bullet was coined on a substance that had these far reaching healing capacities to the body, but left the body unharmed, which is the key because so many drugs, like antibiotics, they have a healing capacity, but they
Right.
don't have like it's not for no consequence. We have a damage to our microbiome. So
Right.
healing, we want to be less damaging to the body and more favorable to healing. And that's why many natural approaches work better because the host, the patient, um, may get a temporary cure of their symptom, right? Which isn't really a cure. In our country, I don't know about your country, but we can't even use the word cure. Only pharmaceutical companies are legally allowed to use the word cure. So only drugs
Right.
cure. And that's the biggest joke ever because most all pharmaceuticals are made in order to block an expression that the body expresses itself based on a stressor. And the stressor could be causing an expression of maybe a lot of mucus and we're having congestion, right? But the stressor and the expression of the stress are not one and the same thing. So a drug to dry up the sinuses is not necessarily addressing the stressor that caused that. And that's where myself and a lot of other practitioners like yourself, we look at the body and we're looking at more of an upstream or a root cause that we can treat that resolves the problem because pain is often not the problem, it's the
Right.
damage, maybe a damaged ligament or a tendon or a cartilage, or it could be an infection or something that is the cause, not the pain. The pain is just a message. It's like you're driving your car and the light comes on, right? And it says, I'm overheating. And we pull over. And what if we were to clip that wire going to that light on our dashboard and then get back in the car and keep driving? What would happen? Something more serious, right? Like, I mean, the car will explode, right? Or something. Cause it's like, hey, I'm overheating, like my radiator's not working or something. I've lost radiator water, but I'm going to clip
Right.
that wire. Why is it okay to do that in the human body when it's obviously not what we would do with a car? We take better care of our cars.
Absolutely. That's very true. That's an interesting story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we're really grateful to have you here today and just to look at your work and the people that you're helping around the world and to have you here today on our podcast and give us your precious time. It's really amazing. And to dive right into our episode today, you did mention about you yourself facing a health crisis at one point. What are some things that you wish you knew about health better at that point when you were going through your health crisis that you know now?
Oh, that's an easy one. I wish in the beginning I knew about high dose melatonin and I wish I knew about methylene blue. Those two substances together are the dream team. Now,
Right.
if I were to give it a third thing, I'd say I wish I was more appreciative about nasal hygiene and the importance of the nasal passage in the mouth. Um, I wish that I had some of the strategies to improve the microbiome and the colon. I call it the doorways to the body: the nose, the mouth, and the colon. And these are the doorways that a lot of toxins enter the body, endotoxins from unfavorable bacterial growth. So I wish I knew more better strategies about that. Um, and those would be my top, what, 3 or 4 things.
Got it. And when you say nasal hygiene, just for the audience who don't know much about it, what do you mean? Like, what do you think are some of the things that we're doing wrong in terms of our nasal hygiene, and what are some things that we can immediately begin with?
Well, so one of the products early on that I developed, which was kind of the spur that got me to create Mitozen Scientific, is a product called Glutastat, and Glutastat's a nasal spray that has essential oils. Now, the reason that you want essential oils is because they work very well against something called biofilm, which is like a sticky protein that protects microbes. And this is the natural defense system that they kind of like get down in it and they just hide. And so you need something to break up biofilm, and essential oils do a very good job. They've actually had studies where they say you need up to um, 1,000 times the antibiotic to kill something in a biofilm versus not. So um, the the silver, we have silver in there, we have NAC, we have glutathione, and we have a whole host of essential oils in this Glutastat nasal spray. And it really it got recognized once COVID came on, and a lot of people were like really looking for something because this isn't like an airborne infection,
Right.
something that can protect you. Because if you can keep biofilm down by doing something
Mhm.
like this, doing sprays, um, then you don't have all that sticky gelatinous material in the nasal passage, so that things that you're breathing in and out of have a place to stick, and then also food to grow on. So,
Right.
so nasal hygiene is really important, and you can do colloidal silver sprays. There's a lot that I'm sure those are easily available um, through stores and so forth in India, which I know primarily that this is going to be airing in India. Is that right?
Yes.
Primarily people in India. Yeah. So this is far away from us, but it's one place I've not been yet, and it's on my list. I practice a lot of Indian um, culture. I'm very into a lot of Hindu and Buddhist practices. So honor the homeland.
That's amazing to know, and we can't wait to host you in India sometime. You're most welcome over here, and we hope to have you here in India sometime soon with all your work coming much closer to our people and being more introduced to everything they're doing currently. So, more than welcome.
Oh wow!
Uh, Come here and let us host you.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you.
And these are some amazing insights. And also, since we were on the topic of melatonin, now just to give a general a view on melatonin, of what generally most people think about it is like it's something that your doctor prescribes you. It's not very normal to just go and take it as a supplement. I mean, today, because of some of these many new supplements and a little bit awareness around it, at least in India, it is a little bit common that like we would start taking it on our own, probably without a doctor's prescription. But usually we just see it, people with issues with their sleep, or mostly women above 40 taking melatonin. But what is it that we are missing out on, and on understanding about melatonin, and why is it that is so crucial for our biology?
Well, so yes, there's a lot of misinformation on melatonin out there, and there's a couple of kind of well-known podcasters that Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman, they've got just giant platforms, and I think they're great, but they're really missing the mark with melatonin. And I can't really put my finger on why that is, because the research is just so obvious. It's so easy to access it, and some of the statements that they're making are just so unfounded, and just, you know, oftentimes not even answering, when they're asked, not even answering the question straight up. Like,
Right.
I think Andrew Huberman was asked if melatonin, if you take it, if it shuts down your own production, and he didn't respond. He just starts to go into a rant about how you shouldn't take it, but there's no real science that follows that. But if you look at melatonin for sleep and you just have that one myopic view of this is all melatonin is involved with, then you might entertain a conversation with these two people. Like, it might be that, but if we start to step out and realize that 95% of the melatonin that's produced is not in the pineal and has nothing to do with sleep, although it is on a rhythm, like our pineal is creating this rhythm of sleep wake, it's called the circadian rhythm.
Right.
um, this rhythm is regulated throughout the body with melatonin, but, like, for instance, the gut, 400 times more melatonin in the gut than in the pineal. And um, and it and it and it regulates microbiome swarming, so it inhibits bad bacteria, it promotes the growth of good bacteria, and it's responsible for having not only a healthy microbiome, but the lining of the gut is protected by melatonin. If it wasn't for melatonin, the lining of the gut would just get eroded, right? And
Right.
you can almost have this argument for about every part of the body, because melatonin is protecting us at every moment, at every second, and throughout all the stressors that are possible. Whether we go out in the sun, or we ingest a toxin, or we don't get enough sleep, or we don't have all the nutrients that we need. Melatonin is there, and it's going to protect you. And so if we look at cancer, the overwhelming amount of research on melatonin inhibiting cancer growth. I mean, why? I just don't understand why these supposed experts aren't aren't speaking about some of the magic of melatonin. I mean, we just talked about. I mean, the ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, as far as the gut, there's a huge body of research showing how much that improves. So we're not we're not a culture of really well people. Um, for the most part, we have a world where most people are sick and they're ill and they're overstressed and they're dealing with um, challenges that stem from poor nutrition, too much mental emotional stress, electromagnetic stress, the burden with toxins and infections is massive. And so when you give all that and you put that in context, and then you realize that melatonin is not toxic at any level. They've done studies where they just stopped the study. It was up to about 150,000 milligrams, on an
Right.
average human. And it was like, oh, no, there's no toxicity. And there's no negative feedback loop. And that's why Huberman didn't answer that, is because there isn't. And he didn't have any, I mean, he could have said that it does, but he would have been like, looking really bad. But um, I'd love to debate some of these people about melatonin in a supportive way, to get some people to recognize that there's a huge benefit beyond sleep. And that's why my book is called Melatonin Miracle Molecule Beyond Sleep.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to travel without. So I propose high doses of melatonin. They called super physiological doses of melatonin. We didn't really get into infections. Melatonin has been shown to prevent the spread of COVID by 54%. It was a study in Canada. Melatonin has been shown both in COVID and a number of other infections to prevent it escalating to death and primarily getting to the point where there's that cytokine storm. Um, so there's really a place in medicine, and there's a place in supplementation, and there's a place in allowing humankind to endure all of these extra stressors and maintain a certain level of health by using melatonin, and it's totally safe.
Got it. And that's very true. Like melatonin and sleep have always gone hand in hand whenever we think about it, right? Like that's the almost the only place where we would hear about melatonin and the only use of it. But this does clarify so much for us. And what would you say? Like, would you say that it can be one of your non-negotiable supplements? Because I feel like it's the case is so much like D3. Like earlier a few years back, consuming vitamin D3 just on your own would be like, I haven't talked to my doctor, or I don't know what dose I should get. And now it's like one of the most non-negotiable supplements in every household. In everybody would have it with multivitamins or just D3, right? So do you think that melatonin can be one of the non-negotiable supplements according to you, for anyone who's on an average health or who is really conscious about their well-being?
Yeah, for sure. It's become that for me. I think that when some people first start taking melatonin, they might have some effects because melatonin will purge heavy metals out of the brain. Heavy metals, melatonin can increase your cellular energy, so the body might start wanting to do some housekeeping. So it's possible that when someone first starts supplementing with melatonin for the first few days, that they may not feel great, and that would discourage a lot of people, and they may walk away from that experience saying, "Well, melatonin just doesn't work for me. I wake up and I'm just super groggy, and I can't seem to shake it off." And so that would be like some people have a hard time clearing, right? Detoxing the melatonin clearance. So some people um, need to take melatonin earlier, right? So maybe it would be around dinner time, a couple hours before they go to bed, because it may take them a couple of hours more to clear that melatonin, so that when they wake up, they're refreshed. Getting light in the eyes, you wake up, and so that's the trigger to shut down the melatonin in the pineal, is the light. So there's ways to navigate around it, and if an individual didn't really appreciate that, then they could be dissuaded, and it may never get to be such a favorable supplement. And so with vitamin D, there's very little, if any, effects. I mean, there's never a negative effect, but the effect with vitamin D is if you take too much and you don't balance it with vitamin K, you can start to get calcium deposits in the body, right? But that takes a
Right.
while, right? So um, I think I think that it's probably not going to become like something that ubiquitous. There's nobody really out there promoting it besides just a small handful of people like myself. So I wouldn't hold your breath, but it could be, right? I mean, it's that good that it has the potential to be people's darling once they get accustomed to it.
Got it. Thank you so much for that explanation. That does ease it down for us. And I hope that our listeners are encouraged to go out there, do their own research, read up more about it, and hopefully get a copy of your book for themselves and learn a lot more in detail about it. The link would be in the description below, so they can definitely check it out and go purchase it for themselves. And talking about cellular energy, you talk a lot about activating cellular energy. What would be some of your most like some of the go-to practices and resources to activate cellular energy?
Well, so cellular energy comes from our mitochondria, and so this is life force. Yeah, our life force is this this energy, and we can make energy from photons or electrons, and photons are non-matter; it's just energy, and electrons is matter. It's a substance, right? So it's interesting. You can start to get into some very interesting spiritual conversations, and you start to look at quantum physics, and the wave versus the particle, and all that. And so, um, keeping to more kind of basic science, the mitochondria moves electrons. And so if we look at its job to move electrons, um, the result of that is it produces heat when they move electrons. And then that heat is kind of harnessed into a chemical energy called ATP. And that ATP is like gasoline to the car, um, to our cells. And we produce that from sugar and oxygen. And so when we look at our bodies and making energy, and um, if we want to be vital and we want to have lots of life force and lots of energy, we want to have really healthy mitochondria. And in order to have really healthy mitochondria, we want to appreciate making it easier for our mitochondria to move electrons. And the best way to do that is to reduce any and all inflammation in the body, because inflammation is the biggest headwind to the mitochondria doing its job. And that's why the whole conversation about the doorways makes so much sense, because we take care of our doorways. Those are the primary ways that activate inflammation in the body. And then when we have that inflammation, it shuts down our immune system. Then other things can happen with, like, candida and Epstein-Barr and Lyme disease, and mold exposure is a big thing that we're seeing in the United States quite a bit. I'm sure you guys are having a lot of problems with that in India as well.
Right.
So these are things that need to be looked at and addressed, and then you'll see massive improvements with the mitochondria. If we just look at it from that basic standpoint, is we have to look at the different stressors and making sure that those stressors are not exceeding our ability to adapt and creating too much inflammation in our body, which is interfering with that electron transport chain in the mitochondria.
Got it. That was well explained. Thank you for sharing that information with us. And that's true. Like today, even if we, I mean, there's just so many things to begin with when we talk about biohacking, or, talk about working on longevity. But just by beginning with managing our stress and toxic overload on our body can help us a lot in the long run, right? So that does help us. Thank you for sharing that with us. And lastly, another thing that seems to be a major part of your work is how you talk about consciousness, and how is it that we can tap into a state of enhanced consciousness. How is it that we can do that, and why should we do that?
Well, so we have our autonomic nervous system, and you have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And when we're in our stress response in our sympathetic nervous system, the brain waves go into high beta, and that high beta helps us to get things done. We're able to focus on something, a task, get that done. Whereas parasympathetic nervous system is more resting and digesting. This state is much more favorable to feelings of bliss, connectiveness, um, mystical experiences, love, and 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 so if we can improve our ability to regulate between periods of stress and periods of, like, deep relaxation, we're going to be more um, our ability to be in the moment, right? So we want to be in the now moment as deeply as possible, resting into the moment, being totally aware of everything happening, like, right now. And there's never going to be any future moments, and you're never going to be living there, right? There's the idea of there's going to be a future, and the idea that there's a past. You're never going to live in either one. You're always going to be just in this moment. And so placing our consciousness in that moment and being able to do that in a really calm parasympathetic state, that's everything, and that requires good mitochondria, and the more vital that we are, the stronger our nervous system is, the better flexibility we have to drop into that calm, relaxed state and get out of that fear and stress response. I mean, even just inflammation triggers the sympathetic nervous system. So, like if somebody has a chronic infection, chronic mercury toxicity, um, candida, a gut infection. I mean, all these things trigger stress response. And so it's very hard for us to pursue spiritual endeavors when there's all of that. I call it noise. When there's a lot of noise from the body, from the nervous system, it's distracting.
Understood. That's very true. And I mean, today, unfortunately, a lot of us are living day in and out where our stress response is triggered every hour, every minute, every other minute, right? And we go in living weeks and months without dealing with it, without doing anything about it. And we might be doing everything else right. We might be working out, we might be eating clean, and we might be having the supplements that we wanted to, but when we don't deal with this and when we aren't able to achieve this calm state in our life, it can really put down all of these efforts, right? So that makes so much sense, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm. Yeah, you're welcome.
That brings us to the end of the episode today. As we conclude the episode, do you have any last messages or thoughts to leave us with?
Well, we didn't get too much into methylene blue. I would just leave you with, I think that this substance can be very powerful at a lot of the similar things that we talked about with melatonin, but it's more of a mitochondrial boost. It's antiviral, antimicrobial, mood uplifting. They did large human trials on depression. And it's one of my go-to. I see methylene blue has the potential more so to be that non-negotiable. Some people here in the States feel like everybody should take at least like 15 to 20 milligrams a day because it's neuroprotective. If you have a heart attack or a stroke or anything like that, and you have methylene blue on board, you're not likely to have a lot of damage to your nervous system. And so we make a methylene blue bar called Lumitol Blue, and I usually find my patients benefit from anywhere from 40 to 80 milligrams a day. Sometimes you can take more um, if you have like an infection or you have different stresses that you want to buffer, but you don't generally want to take more than 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight and expect your
Right.
urine to turn blue. But I couldn't leave this podcast without giving you that gem on methylene blue since we were talking about some of my favorite things.
Understood. And just one last thing to touch up on that is, what are some things that a buyer should keep in their mind when they are purchasing a methylene blue supplement? Like, what should they look for in the right supplement?
Well, you want it to be pharmaceutical grade, and so that some of these products can be tainted with heavy metals. So you want to make sure that you get it from something that's made for ingestion.
Right. Understood. Thank you so much, Dr. John, for all these insights today. And this brings us to the end of the podcast today. We're really grateful to have you here, and all the links to reach out to you and to go and check out your books and learn a lot more from you would be in the description below. Our audience can definitely go reach out and learn a lot more from you. And we really look forward to having you in India sometime. And we can't wait to learn more from you in person over here.
Okay, well, sounds good. Shakshi, thanks for having me on your podcast. And yeah, I look forward to coming into visiting India sometime soon.
Absolutely, we do too. That's it for today's episode. I'm Sakshi Pawar and I'll be your host for the Settle or Be Better podcast. So stay tuned while we bring more inspiring stories. You know the drill. Subscribe to the Settle or Be Better podcast, like, share, and comment on our videos, and hit the bell icon because you don't want to miss the mind boggling health discussions we're about to bring for you. Why settle when you can be better?